Hello, this is James Patterson, Grants Officer with the Community Foundation, and this video will take a look at the Measuring Results section of our web application. And for some of us, this section of the application can be the most challenging. Sometimes we think the funder is looking for world-changing, earth-shaking changes that are out of proportion with the funds we're requesting or the length of the funding period. I'm hoping to make it much easier as we talk about what CFNIL is looking for on this section. There are some key concepts I'd like to introduce in regard to measuring results. Number one is measurement. We made a deliberate choice to change the name of the tab from Outcomes to Measuring Results. We are emphasizing the need for your results to be measurable. Number two is data collection. You will need to collect data, and you'll need to know what to collect before the charitable activity begins. Number three is evidence. Your efforts to measure and collect data are evidence of the change that you're making. It's your proof. I'll get into the specifics about how these concepts drive your evaluation plan in a moment, but first let's talk about why evaluation is important. It's important, of course, that we are doing, the Community Foundation, is doing its due diligence for our donors that proves that their grants are being used appropriately. And of course, it's important that you are showing that you are complying with grant guidelines and agreements. But there are more important reasons to evaluate our grant making and for you to evaluate your programming. We like to think of it as growing the pie. If you can demonstrate the impact that you are making and we can demonstrate the impact our grant dollars are making, donors will want to be part of that. The bigger the pie, the bigger the impact we all can make. So that's a very good reason to evaluate the work that we're doing and measure the success that we're having. There's another part that is sometimes overlooked, however. If you set up your measurement correctly, it can be a feedback tool for you so that you can adjust programming from year to year or even in real time. If you're not getting the results you expected, you'll know and have the opportunity to make course corrections. So program development is another good reason. Well, let's take a look at a common concern for many applicants and grantees that they have when they are defining results to their funders. It's that chance of failure or not performing as well as what you wanted to and the impact that will have on future funding. Of course, we are looking for success stories, and we want every program that we fund, we want it to be successful. But we recognize that there are some ups and downs on that road. The important part is that we are learning and improving our approach. We're really looking at, long-term success. All right, well, let's take a look at the mechanics of the evaluation plan and the measuring results tab. So, the result. What is a result? What do we mean by that? Well, you've heard this called outcome, you've heard it called goal, objective, etc. We are using the word result to avoid some of the connotations that come to mind when the word outcome is used. So what do we mean by result? It's simply the change or improvement that you intend to produce with your proposed activity. Sometimes your desired result will be a textbook example of an outcome. Sometimes you may have to be satisfied with an output. In either case, they will need to be measurable. And that's the key. It has to be measurable. So how do you define your intended results? Well, the key is to begin with the end in mind. If you've read any of Stephen Covey's work, this will sound very familiar to you. The idea is that you have to know what you're trying to achieve in order to develop a plan to achieve it. This sounds easy, but in practice it can be harder to do. Sometimes we have an activity in mind before we've really thought deeply about what change we're trying to effect. And the result is a broad statement, and each of the next pieces define it more. So the indicators of success, what do we mean by this? It's kind of a clunky phrase, doesn't roll off the tongue very well. But it is very literal in what we're looking at. This is the data that you will collect to show evidence of change as a result of your activity. And you can see that data collection and evidence are very important here again. So then targets. What are targets? Again, this is very literal. What degree of accomplishment are you aiming for? It needs to be specific, including a number or a percentage of participants that will meet the defined result. In most cases, this isn't 100%. Again, we need to be realistic as well. It's probably not possible to teach a group of illiterate adults to read at the college level within 6 months, right? So being realistic is very important too. There's always that push to try to make it sound as good as possible, but being honest and realistic is important. But having said that, the target should also be challenging and representative of a change that is worth the dedicated resources. So it's that fine line there. All right, so let's take a look at methods for measurement. Again, a clunky phrase, but it literally is what we're asking for. Is what is your method or plan to measure, count, track participants, or change? How will you collect that data? How will you use a survey, test, or observation? Who will collect the data? How it will be stored? How it will be used? And so on. So that's everything about what your plan is for using the data to know whether you've been successful. The next one is benchmarks, and this is really about context. It's, if you think about it, our committee members don't have the same expertise in your area that you do, of course. So providing some context for them, something to compare against whenever they're looking at your evaluation plan, that can really give them a point of reference. Okay, well, so those are kind of the parts of the plan that we have in the evaluation plan. So what I have now are a few examples to kind of help bring it together here. So let's take a look at an example in education, and this is a 6th grade reading program. So our result, and this is the broad statement, students at ABC school will improve their reading skills. So at this point, it's not saying about how much they're going to improve, any of that. We're just saying they're going to improve. The indicators of success are the numbers of students who demonstrate reading comprehension at the 6th grade level, and number of students who demonstrate reading vocabulary at the 6th grade level. So 2 different indicators that, yes, they are improving their reading skills. And if a certain number of people do it, then we'll know that we've been successful. So the certain number comes under targets. We're defining 85% of students will demonstrate reading comprehension at the 6th grade level. And we're saying that 24 participants will demonstrate reading vocabulary at the 6th grade level. So, and you can see here I've got 2 different indicators, and I'm doing corresponding targets. You don't always have to have 2. It can be 1. Sometimes it can be more than that, but it's things that you can count that can help that you're being successful and that you can demonstrate to others you're being successful. So method of measurement. Well, we're going to test these students with the general reading comprehension and vocabulary test. That's our method for measurement. Try to give some context here with the benchmark. Currently, 30% of ABC School's 6th graders read at the 6th grade level. Nationally, 85% of 6th graders read at the 6th grade level at the end of the year. This gives the committee some idea of what you're trying to accomplish in context. So that's a programmatic example, and sometimes you're looking at something like education that seems easier to measure. So let's take a look at an event. So this event is an East African dance performance. And our result, what we would like to achieve here, is that we want new audiences to be exposed to East African tribal dance. That's our goal. So the indicator of success here is the number of attendees at the performance and the number of attendees who indicate that this was their first experience with East African tribal dance. What are our targets? Well, we want to have at least 300 or more people that attend a performance. And basically, anytime you're doing an event or some type of a workshop or something like that, the number of attendees is an important thing to track. That's going to be one of your results. And there are probably more qualitative results that you're looking for as well. I've sort of mixed it in here together. But you could have, and probably would have, a separate result that would get at quality. So again, back to our targets, we want 300 or more people to attend the performance, and we want 200 or more to indicate that this was their first experience with East African tribal dance. How are we going to do that? Our methods for measurement. We're going to use our ticket sales count, and we're going to survey the audience. So what's our context? Well, we happen to know that the Arts Council in Peoria held this production in March of 2016. They had 305 people attended, and 195 of those indicated that it was the first time that they had experienced East African tribal dance. So we have sort of a benchmark, something to measure against, and that can be context, and particularly for our reviewers too. Okay, so that's an event. Now what about equipment? That's got to be hard to measure, right? So in this case, we're looking at a 15-passenger van. So what is the result? Why do we want this van? This will give our residents greater access to shopping and community events. So that's the broad statement of the improvement. Our indicators of success are the number of unduplicated residents who ride in the new van and the number of rides provided to residents. So our assumption, we're making an assumption here, is that if they're riding the van and there are people riding the van, our residents, then they are going to be having greater access. That's the assumption we're making. So what are our targets? We're going to say that 50 or more unduplicated residents will ride the van. So we have 75 residents. That's there for context. And then we're saying that there will be 2,600 rides given altogether to those 50. So our methods for measurement, well, we have a van usage sign-in log. Before they can ride, they have to sign in. And that way we know who it is, and we can count those up. And then we'll certainly know how many rides were given as well. And what are we doing here for benchmarks? Well, in this particular case, we currently don't have any kind of transportation. So the residents, they have to rely on themselves or their families to get out there. So there's any improvement will be a huge improvement at this point. So there are some examples of the measuring results tab area, and with that concludes this portion of the presentation.